Hello, and thank you all for joining us for this segment, Alzheimer's Research, an Early Career Researcher's Perspective. The moderator of this fireside chat is Dr. Savannah Sims, Research America's Dr. Leroy Hood Science Policy Fellow. She'll be joined in conversation with Dr. James Quinn, Research Fellow in Neurology at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. For those of you who tuned in last year, you may recognize James as the Research America Flash Talks winner for being able to clearly and concisely share his work in Alzheimer's research. Savannah, over to you.
I wanted to start with my first question and ask, James, you were the Research America Flash Talks competition winner last year. You were able to concisely yet engagingly talk about your work and your research in under 3 minutes. I wanted to know, how did you find out about the competition and what drove you to take part?
Right, thank you so much, Anne, for the introduction, and Savannah for the great question there. So it was really just a fortuitous email. I was just going through my MGH emails, as I do kind of end of the day, and I just spotted this one about a flash talk competition, and it was kind of, you put in some information and you can sign up. So I thought, you know what, I'll do this little short summary of my potential presentation. I did it just before leaving the lab for the day, and then somehow ended up getting selected and ended up winning. So I was kind of amazed by that. And I really like to thank everyone who helped organize the competition, as well as the judges and other presenters who I thought were all absolutely fantastic. And for me, public engagement of science is extremely important. The work I do wouldn't be possible without charitable donations and government funding. It's extremely imperative as scientists that we communicate to everyone who indirectly or directly contributes to our research. And finally, as the work I do on Alzheimer's disease involves using cerebrospinal fluid, blood, and brain samples from research participants, both with and without dementia, and other forms of dementia, I see public engagement as a real way of giving back to these incredible people who take part in our research as well.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And so to expand on that a little bit, could you summarize your presentation and that you won the Flash Talks with, and talk a little bit about why you work on Alzheimer's disease and dementia in general?
Of course. So I can give a little bit of a summary of the presentations and the recent findings I've had. So I discussed my work on the importance of diagnosing Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia, really focusing on the importance of synaptic connections to the nerve cells in our brain, and how the proteins that I study, which are known as neuropeptides, these are really important signaling molecules in the brain that travel between nerve cells and synapses. And I discussed our work and the work from others showing that neuropeptides are altered in the brain, as well as the cerebrospinal fluid, which is a fluid that comes directly into the contact with the brain, and how we use this technique called mass spectrometry. I'm not going to go into mass spectrometry for this little summary, but feel free to go back on YouTube and watch my Flash Talk competition win from 2021. And how we use mass spectrometry to detect these neuropeptides in real time, and how we use them to study neuropeptides, and we use them to study in healthy patients and in people living with Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. And finally, I discussed how our work can be used to develop a potential accurate diagnostic test for Alzheimer's disease, as well as open up the potential for new treatments for these diseases. And recently, we've finalized our analysis of cerebrospinal fluid and brain tissue from patients who had Alzheimer's disease, as well as a few other different groups. And we're really excited about this work, and we're aiming to get it submitted for publication shortly. And I think you had another question in there about why I work on Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and kind of why I do what I do. And really, I have one person to thank for that. It was actually my undergraduate Principles of Neuroscience lecturer in 2013. I went back and looked at the date for that one, and she was called Professor Louise Serpell at the University of Sussex in the United Kingdom. And I'll really never forget seeing a slide that she put up in one of her lectures, and it was an Alzheimer's disease brain compared to a non-Alzheimer's disease brain. And in the Alzheimer's disease brain, I remember seeing there was lots of what we call atrophy, so just breakdown of the tissue in the brain. And she kind of described that the weight that's lost in Alzheimer's disease is equivalent to the weight of an orange. And she showed that and said that we have no disease-modifying treatments available for Alzheimer's disease. And I was thinking about all the other classes I was taking at the time around cancer and all these other diseases, where I was often learning about the treatment as well as the disease. And I thought it was fascinating that Alzheimer's disease, we knew quite a lot at that point in time, how we didn't have any drugs to treat it. So I remember I must have asked about 10 or so questions during that lecture. I was probably one of those people that everyone else in the class found really annoying, but for me, I was fascinated, and I was lucky enough to be awarded some research funding to kind of do some work in Professor Circle's lab that summer. And then I continued that work for a PhD, looking at the cell biology of Alzheimer's disease at the University of Manchester, as well in the UK, and then on to Massachusetts General Hospital, where I do my research fellowship right now. And over the last few years, unfortunately, dementia has hit a lot closer to home. My nana was diagnosed with vascular dementia about 3 or so years ago. And my nana and the many other people that I know who are affected by these diseases are the reason I wake up, each morning to continue my research and talk about my research and, just get into the lab and do science every day.
From scientifically and having that personal connection. And I think, unfortunately, so many of us can relate to such a fascinating yet devastating disease like dementia. So, I just wanted to kind of continue on top of that. And could you talk a little bit about the field of dementia and where you see it heading in the future? Because as you mentioned, there are such limited treatments right now, but, thanks to researchers and, they're looking at these long careers ahead, I think we have a lot of hope looking forward.
And I completely echo your sentiment of hope. And I think dementia research, even in the last 8 years that I've been working on it, it's changed so much. I know we don't have any kind of new treatments that are currently being actively used. However, we do have a lot more than just that. We have FDA-approved diagnostic tests that going all the way from brain scans to measure some of these proteins that accumulate in the brain, all the way to cerebrospinal fluid analysis, through to blood tests that are all, approved tests that you can currently, work with your doctor to go and get these tests that really help, work together with the tests that we do around, measuring someone's cognition, and together this full package is really improving the rates of diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And I really think the public perception's changed a lot. I think a lot more people realize that these are diseases that can be cured. They are diseases. They're not just a normal part of aging. And that what really drives my hope is that a lot more people know about it. A lot more people are interested in it. I remember conferences that I went to 5 years ago. Now they're much more populated. There's a lot more researchers working on dementia. And I think the Alzheimer's Association, a charity that I do some work with, they have this big, thing that says that, a researcher is working every minute of every hour around the world working on dementia, and they fund a lot of that research. So I think all of this is really improving our likelihood of developing a diagnostic soon, really. And hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years is what I'm envisaging, a new drug to be kind of coming out. And I know this isn't great news for people like my nana or other people affected by Alzheimer's disease and dementia right now, but it really gives me a lot of hope for the future generations. And if it wasn't for people getting involved in research, we wouldn't have any of these, we wouldn't be at the stage we're at now, and we wouldn't see all the hope that's, further ahead in the future as well.
Absolutely. And I think you're exactly right that, that hope moving forward in the future, especially with our aging population, is so important, and we have a lot to look forward to. So, you're an early career researcher, and I just wanted to quickly, my last question, talk about, what advice do you have for early career researchers, especially those that, like you, want to include science communication as an aspect of their work when, I know how it is to be working in a lab and how busy it is. So, just what advice do you give to other early career researchers?
So I think I have two. So I kind of have one that isn't around the public communication and public engagement. So I'll talk about that one first, and I'll talk about the kind of public engagement one second. So the first one I have is really around building your network, and doing things like public engagement actually help with that. And I kind of say this over and over again to different people I meet who ask for career advice. And I say, I've only gotten where I am today with the help of countless others, in research and outside of research. So, back to my lecturer in, 10 years ago, if it wasn't for her, and then all the other people that kind of came after that, as well as my, friends and family, I definitely wouldn't have had the opportunities that I had. And I'm very grateful for that. And I always think, don't pull the ladder up behind you, kind of, provide those opportunities for people who then work under you and kind of move that forward. And always keep those people updated as well. So I'm always sending emails, every 3 or 6 months to my old supervisors to let them know, oh, I've got a paper that's just come out, or I'm thinking of doing this as my next career step. So I think that's really important. And then in response to your question around public engagement, I once had a fellow, it wasn't actually my supervisor, but it was another supervisor on the floor, and he was saying that you shouldn't really be focusing on talking about your research until you've got something out there. But I kind of, responded, and I was like, well, I do agree with you, but I also don't agree with you. And I think it's so important that we as researchers communicate to the people who are directly sponsoring our research, as well as who are directly affected by our research. And that doesn't just include people who are living with diseases, it includes their friends and family. So, often I'll chat to someone waiting at the train station, or it could really be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in these siloed environments. And I know Research America have a few grants out there for early career researchers looking to get involved in science communication. And I think it's just it's a tough balancing act, but I think it's a very important balancing act to do. And I think getting out there, it gives you that, that inspiration that you need to go into the lab the next day. So I think it's extremely important to talk about the research, and it kind of gives you that, hope for the future as well. I've been to, different schools to talk about Alzheimer's research, and that kind of gives you the hope that there are going to be more people in the future who are kind of interested in getting involved. So even if I don't solve the problem of this right now, but I know that I've helped 10 or 15 people want a career in Alzheimer's research, they're going to make the difference in the future. So I think it's really important, kind of outside of the day-to-day lab work. I think it's something that you kind of just have to make the time for.
I think that's a fantastic answer, especially, harkening back to what you said when we opened about, our work as scientists is so public facing, and it's often funded by taxpayer dollars, and it's so important. And even though, it doesn't always have to be a formal avenue for science communication, but there are opportunities out there, like at the train station, like you mentioned, because people want to be engaged, and it does impact all of us. So as much as I would love to continue this conversation for another hour, I think we are out of time. So thank you, James, so much for your time and for your participation in this event. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Savannah, and to the rest of the Research America team. And I'd also like to plug the Flash Talk competition. I've heard it's coming back next year. So definitely anyone who's a budding science communicator, please get involved. And it definitely helped that I had props. I didn't have my orange today to talk about the loss of brains, but I used that last year and it went down well. So that's my final bit of advice I'll give to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.